Mischievous Kitties, springtime. A signal to the kitties that the weather was starting to change was when the rattling vents throughout the house stopped blowing warm air and started blowing cold air. Jewel realized this the hard way. One weekend morning, she was sleeping in the sunroom in a bed near one of the air vents. She was lightly dozing and enjoying the feeling of the warm air ruffling through her short fur. She didn't even notice when the air slowed down for a moment, and then cold air started to blow at full power. Still asleep, she curled tighter into a ball, but the cold continued. She woke up shivering. She looked around, angry that she had been woken up so rudely. But she couldn't find a reason for the cold. The other kitties were not even in the same room. She looked behind her and sniffed the vent. She sneezed angrily and stood up, stretching out of the direct airflow. Her fur fluffed up as she searched for a warmer place to nap. Her ears perked up when she heard Owner walk out of the side door. She crept to the living room, ears swiveling, listening carefully for any noise. When she rounded the doorway into the living room, she saw the side door was wide open. She stopped and tilted her head to one side. Why was the door wide open? She looked around. She didn't see any of the other kitties. Maybe Owner took them out there in the big kennel. But if that was true, why was she left behind? Her ears slumped a little at the thought, but then perked back up. Maybe the door was open for her, so she could catch up. She carefully approached the door. Her paws stepped carefully onto the tile floor. She sniffed the small hallway and smelled the soap that was on Owner's clothes and the kitties' beds. She guessed the two machines that lined one side of the hall were where Owner's clothes were washed. She continued down the small hall, but just came to a wall. Confused, her ears twitched and she looked to her right. Just on the other side of the two machines was another door. This one, too, was open. She sniffed, and the grimy mix of oil, exhaust, and gasoline stung her nose. Yep, this was definitely where Owner kept that big kennel on wheels. Her ears twitched. She couldn't hear Owner, but maybe she wasn't close enough to hear, so she stepped in. The concrete felt smooth but cold under her paws. She bobbed her head close to the floor as she sniffed. Dust gathered in her nose and she sat down and started to sneeze several times. She shook her head and then shook again. If that much dust got in her nose, she didn't even want to think about what was getting in her ears and on her white coat. She shuddered and then looked around. The room was big. No, it was huge. Bigger than the living room. There were very few windows. Small windows lined the top of the two doors that were shut, and there was a larger window on the far side of the room. The kennel on wheels also sat on the far side of the large room. It blocked the window a little so Jewel couldn't see any of the outside. But even with that window blocked and the main doors closed, the room was actually pleasantly lit. She took a few more steps further and more sniffing. She couldn't hear or see Owner. Even the rolling kennel was still silent. She sniffed out faint traces of Owner's scent. She figured that Owner had been here recently, but wasn't here right now. And then she suddenly picked up another scent, a sweet scent. She looked up and saw something filling the space between her and the big door directly in front of her. She creeped up slowly. Then she realized it wasn't one thing, but many small things. Black cylindrical containers. She approached one and gently sniffed the edge of the open top. She smelled dirt and something else. She got a little closer and looked inside. She saw it was filled almost to the top with dirt, but there was a small, bright green plant in the middle with a colorful, closed bud. She looked around and saw another slightly bigger plant, though the bud was open. A flower! They were pots of flowers! Jewel approached the open bud and sniffed. The beautiful smell filled her nose and she closed her eyes. She then walked around all the pots, memorizing each smell. She quickly realized that not all flowers smelled the same, or even looked the same. She felt like she was surrounded by a rainbow of perfume. She jumped around the pots excitedly, her tail flicking in the air. She then twirled, almost hitting her head against the big metal door, and then felt something brush her tail. She looked and saw one of the plants at the very corner of the bunch. She tilted her head to the side. The flower looked weird. There was no flower, just a green plant sticking up out of the pot. She gasped and caught movement over by the kennel on wheels. There was a full open head of the flower laying on the floor by the back wheel. Her eyes widened in horror and she jumped towards the flower, but it blew away from her. "No, no, no," she called as she gently crawled towards it. "Come back. I'm sorry I knocked you off with my tail." She looked behind her. Bad tail. She trailed off when she thought she saw owner by the door that led her here, but then with a small boom sound, the door was closed. "Uh-oh," she gasped, her ears folded back against her head. "No, oh no, 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 no." She ran towards the door. She pressed her paws against it and mewed. "Hey, I'm still in here." She scratched the door. "I'm locked in here." She pressed her ear to the door, but there's no reply. She looked around her. Her ears quivered, and even her pink bow sagged a little. She hugged the door and scratched weakly at it with one paw. "Don't leave me here alone." Her ear twitched as she thought she heard a rustling noise above her. She looked, but couldn't see anything. Maybe it was just the wind? She was about to scratch on the door again when she heard something fall behind the large kennel. She couldn't see anything, but she still sat perfectly still. A scratching noise started near where the dropped flower lay, and then it started around the flower pots towards her. Her eyes widened, and she shrunk down into a small ball as she let out a tiny squeak. "Help!" The scratching reached the edge of the flower pots, and a little bird jumped out. Jewel lightly jumped, but then tilted her head to the side, confused as the bird looked around. When it spotted her, it fluffed up and cheeped, "Ah, cat!" and hopped back amidst the flower pots. Jewel popped her head up as her eyes followed the flash of feathers between the pots. She gently crawled towards the flower pots. "Hey," she whispered, "are you trapped too?" She hugged against a flower pot and waited for a reply. "Looks like I am," came a shrill cheep from the group of pots. "I have fallen right into your trap." "My trap?" she repeated, shocked. "You think I planned this?" "Yes. Oh, you must be so proud of yourself, mighty hunter," the bird chirped. "First of all, I'm not a hunter." "Okay, huntress, pardon my mistake," it sarcastically cheeped. "No, I mean I don't hunt for my food at all." "You don't? But you're a cat." "A cat who has a full food bowl sitting in the kitchen that I can access anytime I want. Morning, noon, or night." She spoke softly. She heard the scratching noise come towards her, so she tried to put herself in a non-threatening pose. A small brown feathered head, housing two black beady eyes and a yellow beak, poked out to look at her. "So, you don't want to eat me?" "You're so small, you wouldn't make a proper meal. And besides, dealing with all those feathers would be a nasty business. I'd rather keep my pristine coat pristine." The bird hopped all the way out and made a jerking motion with its head as it looked her up and down. "Not pristine right now, if I do say so myself." Jewel shivered. "That's because I'm stuck in this disgusting room. Even with the nice-smelling flowers in here, it's going to take a week for the grimy smell to wear off," she whined, wrinkling her nose for emphasis. The bird stretched up, pointing its beak in the air. "Well, I smell what you mean. Why do people have to use those things?" "What, the large kennel on wheels?" she asked. The bird nodded and shrugged. "Beats walking, I guess. Personally, I do prefer owner carrying me downstairs instead of walking the whole way. I guess owner feels the same way about the kennel and going to work." "What's work?" the bird chirped. I really don't know. Something Peaches told us about. Who? Another cat that lives in the house. What? The bird fluttered in surprise, hovering above the pots. Jewel quickly flattened herself to the ground. There's another cat here? Oh, clever. You lured me into a false sense of security of you not being a hunter just to let another cat do the hunting for you. She's not here with me. Mousers, if I was really just a diversion for another cat, why would I tell you about her and blow her cover? The bird hovered for a moment and then landed on a pot. I guess you're right. Peaches is another cat that lives in the house with me, Jewel explained and tilted her head towards the small door that led inside. Ah, exactly how many cats live in this house? The bird chirped inquisitively. Including me and Peaches? 6, Jewel responded. 6? The bird fluttered again. Will you please stop that? I am dirty enough without you constantly blowing more towards me, she exclaimed, closing her eyes to protect them from airborne dust. The small bird landed and preened its feathers. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry about that, Princess. My name is Jewel. Many pardons. Jewel rubbed her whiskers with a paw. So, what is your name? The bird tilted its head to one side. Name? Yeah. What your family calls you. Oh, well. I started out as a hatchling, then fledgling. They haven't given me a new name since I became an adult. So, the last thing you were called is fledgling? Oh, that's impersonal. There are so many sparrows. Does a named one really matter? Yes, it does. So you are a sparrow. And your last given name was Fledgling? She put her paw to her mouth as she thought. I got it. Fletcher. Huh? That's the adult name that I have given you, Jill said proudly. But we aren't family. How can I accept a name from someone who isn't family? Especially a cat. Because we're friends. Friends? Really? Sure. If you like to be. She blushed a little. I would like to be friends with you. You are a strange cat. But I like that name, Fletcher responded. So, Fletcher, how did you get stuck in here? I was looking for nest materials. Then I saw the flowers and decided to look for worms. Jewel's eyes widened in shock. Why were you looking for worms? They're food, Fletcher chirped. Icky! Jewel made a face in disgust. Yuck! How can you eat worms? Fletcher just stared at her and blinked for several moments. It's what sparrows eat, he cheeped. The owner has that thing hanging in the yard for you guys to eat. Things are nice, but it's hard for sparrows to get a chance because of robins, cardinals, and blue jays chasing us off. Blue jays are the worst, so we just get what we can, which is worms or berries from the bushes. Huh, okay. Worms like dew plants and good soil, so when I saw the pot, I wondered if I could get lucky. Jewel then stood up on her back paws to check out the soil. But she started to lose her balance and ended up putting her front paws right in the soil around the flower. Great, now my paws are really dirty. Fletcher jumped up on top of the soil opposite her paws. He picked at it and listened. No worms here. Okay, well let's try the other pots. One by one they checked through the pots, Jewel's normally gray paws becoming black from the potting soil. As they searched, they chatted and chittered about where they grew up, life on the inside of the house versus the outside, and trying to plan how they could stay friends even with a wall between them. After what felt like all day, and a couple spilled pots, there were no worms. They were just coming up with another plan when Jewel's ears started to twitch wildly. What is it? Fletcher asked. I think owner is calling me, but it's too faint to tell for sure. The next moment, the door opened and Jewel bounded towards owner's feet, her paws tracking dirt behind her. Fletcher hid behind a flower pot and watched. Jewel looked back, expecting to see the sparrow fluttering about so owner could open the big door for him. But no, he was sulking among the flowers. She mewed, trying to signal him, but he sat still. Just as Owner was about to pick her up and clean her paws, she bounded away towards the pots. "Flutter!" she mewed loudly. "Flutter!" "But you don't like it," he chirped. "Pretend I'm chasing you. Fly, so Owner will let you back outside, back to your family." She quickened her pace to an aggressive run. Fletcher quickly took the hint. He flew upwards to the rafters just as Jewel faked a swipe at him with a paw. Owner quickly ran after Jewel, scooped her up, took her in the house, and opened the large door. Jewel was relieved that Owner held her up to the window on the door in the hallway. She watched as the very confused sparrow fluttered around a few moments before finally flying outside. Owner shut the door and took her upstairs for a bath. After the bath, when she was strutting around proudly that her coat was again pristine, the other kitties bombarded her with questions. So many questions about being lost, hurt, or how she should know better than to wander off. She let them screech and howl at her as they followed her to the sunroom. She jumped up on a chair and looked out towards the bird feeder. When the yowling finally ceased, she caught the sight of a little sparrow. It flew up and landed on the bush that sat right next to the window. It fluttered and then flew off. Jewel smiled when she realized that he had a worm in his beak. She sighed happily and looked back at the other kitties, who were all waiting for an explanation or something. She simply replied, "I was gardening with a friend."